Welcome everyone to the Yet to Be Named podcast. I'm joined today with Michael Barrett, an old friend of mine who I find immensely inspiring and interesting. He has some shared history with me in terms of a trading background, and he's taken that further into mentoring traders and doing some other interesting work on trading. So, Michael, welcome to the Yet to Be Named podcast. Would you like to give a brief introduction of who you are and why people should be interested in you?
Very good. Why they should be interested in me? Well, funny to put it that way. So yeah, I guess we could start around 2013 when you and I met. That was sort of the beginning of us both beginning our trading careers in the professional sense, and so that was about 12 years ago or so. So I was a professional trader for 10 years until around 2023 or so. You and I obviously traded together, one account for a period of that time as well. And so since 2017 until around Corona time, I was also running the trainee program for the firm that we were with. Stepped away from that in the middle of Corona as my kids were being born, and I was moving from Sydney over here to Germany. And the trainee program was obviously conducted in house. So I still manage a group of the experienced traders from around that time, but I obviously handed off the trainee program at that point. And yeah, so at the moment I live between Australia and Germany. Prior to our kids starting school, it's a good opportunity to be able to have the kids spend some time in both of the different environments, picking up both languages. Um, yeah, that's where I am.
Very good. So, just on that, like the mentoring traders. So, I'll dig into trading in a minute, but the mentoring traders, like, what do you find most rewarding about that, and what has that taught you about life and success?
The mentoring traders is actually very different depending on what stage of their development that they're at. Like obviously, with very new traders, very young traders, the things that they are and needing are very trading focused. You know, how do I find good trades? How do I get rid of my bad habits? Those sorts of things. But it's been quite a while since I've been right there at the beginning of trainees' journeys. Generally, now managing the more experienced guys, the questions aren't so much directly trading related. It's more around how do I manage how the rest of my life interacts with my trading. And then because trading is very much a competitive industry, it's like a performance sport. And you really do need to have attention, focus, energy directed towards it to be able to do it well. And so when guys typically begin their trading careers, they're generally sort of young, not much else going on in their life, very little distraction. If they want to fully dedicate themselves to it, then they generally do. And then as they become older, just the rest of life becomes more complex as well. People have more serious relationships. Maybe kids come along, and there's a lot of pulling on their attention from what they used to be able to just completely dedicate it to trading. There's now a lot competing for their attention, and so it's how do we navigate that, being able to continue focusing on trading, but also not let the other parts of your life that are also important now fall by the wayside. So that's like those are some pretty interesting discussions because there's often not perfect answers, but there are a good combination or a best possible combination that you can come up with for a given individual. And so that's a lot of the conversations that I do frequently have.
So that's probably a good segue into your YouTube channel, which is Only Trade Offs, which is a fantastic name. And so what you're describing there essentially is that, like with that no perfect solution, that there's always some kind of compromise, right? And so that seems to be at the essence of like the content you put out, and also the way that you, a lot of the conversations that we've had, and the way that you kind of mentor guys, I guess, is that everything is a compromise, or that, like, how do you think about it? Is it everything's a compromise, or is it that you can only do a few things really well? Like, what's the way that you think about it in your mind?
Not along the lines of a compromise. A compromise kind of is the least, generally speaking, what ends up happening with compromising most of the time. It is the least unacceptable way of doing things for each of the parties involved. as quite often what a compromise ends up being, which is not very satisfactory, and it's also not very, it doesn't have a lot of longevity. It's not a solution that can last through a lot of time because frustration will build. And so it's very much less around how can I compromise, but more what do I trade off? What do I not do? Understanding that if you want to do something well, you typically can't do too many other things at the same time. What are the responsibilities that you have in your life at the moment? What are the things that you really want to be dedicating your time, attention, energy, focus, resources towards? And that basically means that you have a very small list of the things that you want to do well and be focusing on. And you end up with a very long list of things that you are kind of semi interested in and wouldn't mind doing, but you have to say no to in order to be able to perform at the level that you want. And so, yeah, less about the idea of a compromise and more around the idea of being fairly strict with yourself, putting your own restrictions in place upon yourself so you can achieve the main thing that's important to you.
So what's the core difference there between a trade-off and a compromise? So is a compromise just in your mind, like just listening to you talk just now, it sounds like in your mind, like a compromise is just when you're doing something half-assed or something like that. Like in your mind, what is the difference between a compromise and a trade-off?
Yeah, so like in terms of like a diet related example, a compromise is that you would allow yourself to eat, you know, a cheat day on every so often. You can have a cheat day, or a particular amount of your calories can come from sources that aren't you know, highly nutritious sources or something like that. Whereas when you're making trade offs, it's not that you would never have a cheat meal, but you don't set your life up to have a cheat meal, you know, on a regular basis. It's the understanding that I need and I want to put my energy towards this particular thing. And if I go and eat a pizza once a week and feel sluggish for the rest of that day and maybe even a little bit of the next day, then that's really robbing you of, you know, 12 to 24 hours of where your attention and your energy is going, and missing out on that progress. And so you're not sort of going to half-ass it for that period of time. You still eat a pizza occasionally, but you don't have that idea of compromise. And I can get a little bit of this that I want and a little bit of that I want. It's not all of this is going in this particular direction. And so I'm trading off the dietary habits so I can have this outcome.
Okay, so that's interesting. So really what you're saying is you choose a very limited number of things, and those things essentially you don't compromise on. Those things are you put everything into them, whatever they are, whether they're trading or whatever it is, and everything else gets traded off. And the extent to which they get traded off is the extent to which they don't impact your primary goals. Is that a fair way of summarizing it?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, yeah. And I just add to that as well, like it's all in the context of your current phase of life. Like these aren't decisions that you need to make and hold yourself to for decades into the future. It's a case of dedicating your time, attention, energy to the thing that you're mainly wanting to do or doing right now, which will go for a period of your life. That could be, you know, weeks to months to years, but it's not something that has to be done ongoingly into the future. Like you need to keep in mind that you will step into different phases of life as you go through life, as you get older, and you don't have to hold yourself to them at different points. But in order to get what you do want most, it's important to do it for the time being in your current phase of life.
Yeah, sure. So, uh, do you think that there's a optimal amount of those core goals that you're working towards at any one time? And maybe, like, obviously, the phase of life thing is very important because, well, maybe the number of things stays the same, but some of those things get forced upon you, right? So, like, once you have kids, hopefully, if you're a decent human being, one of those core priorities is your kids to some extent. Like they, it has to be to some extent. So then, is there an optimal number? Like, is just having one thing that you're completely obsessed about, and that's all you spend your time doing, and everything else is traded off against that? is that unhealthy, or is that like optimal, or is there a different optimal number?
I think the answer to that will change depending on where you are in your life. Like when you look at a lot of the aspiring trainees, guys that are just say sort of early 20s, they're coming in, they're hungry, they want to establish themselves as a trader, they want the outcomes of being a successful trader in terms of being able to set themselves up for following phases of life. With those guys, generally speaking, there's not much else going on that would require the attention anyway. And to a certain extent, the more you can restrict their intentions to be doing other things like chasing girls and other stuff that traders do, the more that you can restrict that, the quicker that they will get this thing up and running. And because of the trainees that do manage to establish themselves into successful traders, the exponential on their equity curve can be massive. And so if you can establish somebody a little bit earlier in that, they get that exponential benefit a lot quicker versus a trainee that sort of comes in and wants more the lifestyle of a trader as opposed to the actual execution of being a trader. And there's definitely some stories of that as well. And guys obviously can blend the two. There are some guys that can blend the two, but it it is dependent on the phase of life you're in. Like the trainees that have certainly done the best are the ones that have really made sure that they're not distracted and they've got nothing else going on, completely focus on what they're doing. And then, as I said, like some of these guys I still do manage now, years down the line, where they have stepped into, finding a wife and having children, and then it becomes a different story because you would sacrifice a lot to be having as much focus on trading as what you previously did, and so you in order to live a satisfying life at that point, it's not so much about focusing on trading so you can get it up to speed so you can bank as much as you can. There is more of the rounded taking time to be with family and having a positive influence on your children and that sort of thing that would contribute to having the type of life that you want. So yeah, generally the one thing that you focus on, if you're going to go down that path, it can get very good results. But for a fully rounded life, you're going to have to soften on that at some point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of like very successful people that when you listen to them talk, they say that the idea of work-life balance is it's basically for mediocrity. It's for people who want to achieve something mediocre, and the people who really achieve greatness, they have to leave that idea of having a balanced life or trading from a beach in Thailand behind.
Mm.
So but wouldn't that be nice, trading from a beach in Thailand? um, Mike, you've like obviously the mentoring brings its own challenges and rewards, and not many people will get to that point where they get to mentor other traders, or at least not many people that it's worthwhile listening to. Let's put it that way. So there seems to be almost as many mentors out there as traders sometimes, like in terms of people trying to sell, their own guru status. But obviously, a lot of them don't necessarily have a lot of that's of value to impart, and that's why I'm pretty excited to talk to you today. But in terms of the trading background, like how did trading change your life and the way you see reality, or did it at all? Like, did it change the way you see yourself, like through that journey? Because I'm pretty sure you feel the same way. For me, trading was a very transformative journey, and it really forced me to look at myself and reflect on myself. So, what did you get out of that experience?
Yeah, trading is extremely beneficial as far as you are every day turning up to be in a very competitive environment. The at the end of the day, anyone who's in there is in there making money, and that does mean that it's very competitive. And it is essentially the world stage. You will have all the best traders in the world, all in the financial markets, trying to pull out as much money as they can. And so, when you are trading in that professional environment, and also with the structure of how we trade as well, like you don't get paid if you don't make money. If you lose money one month, you have to go in, make your money back the following month, make some more money, and then you can pay yourself. And so there's not financial safety nets as around. You don't have salaries and things like that. you actually do need to perform to make money in order to pay yourself, and then obviously extend on from there. So when you are faced with that competitive environment, in some ways, it's a very good reflection of reality. Because at the end of the day, like the safety nets and things that are around, they don't have to be there all the time. They can be taken at any point, which we've seen in different ways. And so, interacting with that highly competitive environment, you do have to conduct yourself in a way that is highly competitive, that manages the stress and the tension of that. So you do learn that your interpretation of what's going on needs to become reliable. And so, if there is any ways where your current interpretation of reality is unreliable and not getting good results, you're much more inclined to go and look at those, because getting that right will lead to be able to make money. And the other part that I would say is very good is the exposure to risk. You know, being alive carries risk, and so trading the markets carries risk. But with the thing with trading is you're always trying to manage your risk to the acceptable level of expense before you start running into diminishing returns, and obviously hedging your risk so far that there's not a possibility of making money anymore. You're always trying to get that balance right, and that shifts all of the time. And so you get such a fast feedback loop of the interaction with risk, which I think is really key, because anywhere else in life you're always taking risks no matter what you're doing, but the feedback loop can be very long, and so it can be very you don't necessarily adjust your behavior fast enough in life, whereas in trading you're forced to, and that does carry through to your life as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I was going to mention as you were talking was that it's like a direct feedback, right? So you learn so quickly about what works and what doesn't, or you get the feedback anyway, and hopefully you learn from that.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a really good point. Like, I think for me, like I had a lot of like in order to succeed as a trader, you have to really look at yourself, like have a hard look at yourself constantly, because the market is always beating you up to some extent, right? Even when you're doing well and making money, you're going to have those little moments where the market beats you up and you have to go back
Mm,
and have a think about it. And you got to kind of reflect on yourself and go like, was I being greedy there? Like, was I emotionally attached to a position that I should have just cut a long time ago? Whatever it is, you have to look at yourself, and then sometimes you have to go much deeper, right? And you have to look at, um, whatever little incident from my childhood that made me, you know, attached to not losing or something like that, and go unravel those little threads and try to understand yourself at a really core level. That was one of the things that I really got the most out of trading, more than money, I think, or the freedom of trading. More than that was the process of like refining yourself and working on yourself, which for me was a fantastic experience. But the other thing you mentioned there about risk, I think, is really important too, because I know a lot of people who used to trade who've gone on to become entrepreneurs, right? Like a lot of people take that same mentality of like, how do I make money? And really, they're still a trader. They're just moving outside of exchange traded markets and looking
mm.
at um, how do I exploit opportunities, which is basically what trading is. How do I find and exploit opportunities, and then how do I scale that up, which I think is really the essence of trading to an extent. What are your core values, and like how did they change, if they did change, through your trading career? Were there any values that you had to drop in order to become a successful trader, or were there any values that you had to pick up?
The first one that comes to mind is, prior to trading, I would have had, I guess, a life philosophy that there's a formula that you can find that will allow cause and effect to occur. And if you can't do something and you would like to be able to do the thing, it's a case of finding the formula that can do it. And, or find somebody to model, and then you'll be able to model what they do and obtain the cause and effect in that way. And to a large extent, that does work, but it's not the complete picture. And the thing that interacting with the risk environment, the competitive environment that it taught me was that itself, that formula that attempts to secure cause and effect, always sits within context, and that context constantly shifts. And so it's not just a case of what formula will get me a reliable enough cause and effect happening here, but what are the conditions, or what is the context that will support also that result happening. And so it was paying a lot more attention to context and matching execution with context, and obviously adapting that as context shifts to be able to get the outcomes that you want.
Okay, so do you think then that there are any values that you see in like the really successful traders that are like really important to becoming a successful trader? Are there any values that you think are really necessary?
Values, they're always very curious, and it's people can be very hungry and very competitive, but it's more of a there's a curiosity of, this is a puzzle that I'm trying to put together. Every day the solution to this puzzle slightly shifts, and how do I put this puzzle together today in the best way that I can, at the same time really trying to push, how can I get on the most amount of risk I can get on with an acceptable expense or an acceptable possible downside of that. That's something that shifts every day. And so, as opposed to this idea that I will find a trading strategy and then that's going to be my edge, and then I can just execute that edge and money will keep rolling in consistently. That's really not how it works. This is something that needs to be, you know, adapted through whatever market conditions are currently there, and adapted subtly every single day. And for most people, that's an exhausting concept. What do you mean I've got to rethink how this thing happens every day? Like, it's just too hard, and it's too much brain power, too much bandwidth that needs to go into that. Whereas for the most competitive guys, they're more seeing it as a game. It's a game they get to try and put together each day. And so those guys, you just won't compete with somebody in that frame of mind who's loving putting this puzzle together and loves when it shifts, because they can be the first one to be able to respond to that shift. And if you're somebody who's exhausted by that process, you just won't be able to keep up with them.
So you would say that, is that what, a playful curiosity or something like that?
It
How would
can
you
be a
describe
playful
it?
curiosity. There are personality types that does come through as a playful curiosity, but there's also personality types that would be more along the lines of superiority complex. Like, I'm superior, not in terms of the way that I'm superior and others are inferior, but my ability to work out this puzzle is superior to everyone else. I can win, and therefore I will win, and I'm going to get it done in that way. That kind of competitive, it can come out that way as well. It's personality related.
So it's more of a competitiveness, and then the way that's expressed kind of depends on the individual personality almost, whether
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
playful or aggressive, or how that is.
And
And
even
what
even arrogant, it can be. But is yeah, to the degree to which your ability backs up your arrogance, you're not necessarily being arrogant, as long
yeah.
as you're being socially, not too socially abrasive or whatever.
So what about like things that are negatives for trading? Like, are there any things that, in terms of personality, like obviously situations sometimes can be out of people's control, and having kids when you're just starting off is probably makes it 10 times more difficult and things like that. But uh, if you were to look at like the personalities of people who have failed as traders, like, and the personalities of people who have succeeded, are there any things that you think, like traits or beliefs or core values or anything like that, that people absolutely have to get rid of before they can become successful as a trader?
Yeah, I can think of a couple actually. One along the lines that, that if you take confidence, and we're speaking about arrogance a minute ago, you can take somebody whose confidence or arrogance is far in excess of their ability to actually execute on that. You can take somebody like that, and that can actually be a situation that can work, because you can put a lot of guardrails in place when that person's quite junior at trading. You can make sure that they don't lose an unacceptable amount of money in a short space of time. And I've definitely managed trainees that are like that, and it can obviously be a bit of a frustrating thing when somebody's opinion of themselves is far in excess of their ability to execute. But the great thing about trading is that situation will never sit there for very long. It will not be long before the market teaches them through losing money that they weren't as good as what they thought. And so you never really mind when somebody like that turns up, because one or two things is going to happen pretty quickly. They're either going to get smacked by the market enough that then they leave, or that they get smacked by the market enough that they go, okay, I'm not the boss here. I've got to be able to respond to this. And you can have the guardrails around that person. And I have had conversations with trainees months down the line saying, well done. I think that your ability to execute has caught up with where your confidence was after having had the reverse conversation with them a few months previous. So you can work with somebody like that. But somebody on the other spectrum that comes in with very low confidence, it's difficult to work with that, because any small hiccup can become a problem. And with trading, you are always, or almost always, wrong to some degree. Like, very rarely do you make a plan and then it just perfectly plays out and you make money. That happens hardly ever. And honestly, there's no skill in that really when it does happen. Like, anyone can make money when you make a plan and then that's exactly what happens. The skill in trading is responding to whatever degree of wrong you happen to be, whether you're 9/10ths right or 1/10th right. How do you respond to how incorrect you are in your current interpretation? And so somebody who's really underconfident, they can be hard to lift to that point. There's not a lot of guardrails you can put around that, and they're quite fragile and sensitive. The one thing that I would say is, if you're working with somebody like that, or if you happen to be someone who's very unconfident and attempting something new, you have to do whatever you can to get some momentum. And then you really cannot let that momentum drop. If that momentum drops even once with somebody who's really unconfident, you may never pick it up, and it might require even more momentum the next time to be able to pick it up. Um, so yeah, I would say that's a dynamic that you do need to manage carefully. The question that we started with speaking about here, can you remind me what the exact question was? Because there was another example that I was going to give.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good answer, because the question was, like, my first question was, are there any core values that people need to survive as a trader or to become successful? And the second question was, are there any things that like people need to get rid of, like values or traits or anything like that, that people need to get rid of in order to become successful as a trader? You've So your answer is basically that you can't be, what's the word? You can't be too shy. You can't lack in confidence. So obviously the flip side of it's either you've got confidence, or the negative trait that you've got to get rid of is a lack of confidence, is what I took from what you've just said.
Which I think, I've discussed confidence with a lot of people in a lot of nuance, and something that often helps unconfident people increase their confidence is to not think of confidence is something that I'm missing. Think of confidence as being the state where you are lacking your unconfidence, for lack of a better way to put it. It's
Self-doubt or something like that.
Yeah, it's a state where you're, because you can put yourself back into the shoes of a time when you were really confident in something that you did. It's not really at the forefront of your mind that I have confidence in what I'm doing right now. It's more just you're in this neutral state where you're competent at what you're doing, and that you're doing what needs to be done, and probably because you've had a lot of experience in doing that before. And so it seems to be more of a tangible thing to help somebody who is really lacking confidence. It's about this shedding the timidness, or whatever it is, timidity, whatever it is they have, is a better way to think about it.
So self-confidence is very important, and also this competitiveness or like playful curiosity, really. Well, that was one expression of it, but let's say
Yeah, yeah,
competitiveness.
yes, exactly. There, and so to extend on the answer from the question before as well, I can give a few examples of what isn't resourceful as far as being a trader, and a couple of guys in particular do come to mind. Very like one guy in particular, he's probably the smartest person that I ever met, but he was actually too smart to make money. And I had this conversation around the time when he was finishing up. But the thing was, he was so intelligent and very used to thinking things through before taking action, which almost always is the right thing to do. And in trading, you do that. You do sit down at the beginning of the session and try and think ahead as to what you might encounter. But when you're a manual trader, discretionarily trading and executing in real time, thinking is too slow for your execution. If you sit there and think, is this the spot to get in? If it was, it's already gone. And if it's still there, now that's a bad trade because it sat around and it's still available to you after thinking. And so thinking was too slow. And the conversation that I had with him was that he was very successful in his life prior to coming to being a trader, and he attributed a lot of that to his intellect and his ability to think things through and take good action on the back of having thought it through. And he just wasn't able to let go of that because it had brought him so much success previously, and it meant that that was the problem with his execution. If it was a good trade, he sat there and thought about it and it was gone. And if it was a and then the bad ones always let you in because it's still sitting there. And he
I,
just and
yeah,
he couldn't shake that. And so
I might know who you're talking about. I have a feeling I might know, but yeah.
yeah, there was a few examples of this, but yeah, you might know the guy in particular. But he wasn't he was saying this all in something that he discovered about himself, that exploring trading in a discretionary manner on type timeframes, it wasn't for him, and he was very grateful for having had the experience where there are parts of life where intellectualizing things and thinking things through isn't what gets results, and it was very kind of eye-opening for him. And so there really can, like, the actual skill of trading is quite different to what you think it's going to be, and that's a very good example of it there. And the other example that can come from it is another trader was really able to improve his profitability quite a lot by not taking a trade unless it was accompanied by, and his words were just, the feeling. And so he would wait until an entry signal that he should be getting in with was also accompanied by a feeling in his gut that this was a good trade. And that didn't get him into more winners, but it definitely kept him out of some of the losers. And that's, if you can do that, that can make a huge difference to your P&L, which it did. And so it was kind of honing that skill.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Um, I guess the way we learned to trade, right? So we learned as click traders, so sitting there in front of the ladder and watching the prices move up and down and bids and offers build and fall, and watch the orders go through the book and all that kind of stuff. What that method of learning gives you, if you're good at it, is it gives you gut feel, and that's what click trading really, particularly now, like if you think about all of the automation and AI and everything like that, like as a click trader, someone who sits there and clicks buy and sell, how are you going to compete with robots that can think and execute way faster than you? The only thing you've potentially got is gut feel. And like in a world of AI, maybe that doesn't last very long as an edge. I don't know, but um, I think that's a really critical thing, because yeah, if I think about the best traders I know who are click traders, like I can't really think of anyone that would have talked, like that would have never talked about something that you could put down to like gut feel, right? Like all of the best traders who are click traders, they've always got some, you see it in them. There's always sometimes they're getting out of things and they don't know why, or it could be exactly the same trade as yesterday, but they don't necessarily articulate some rational reason for jumping out of the trade.
Yeah, traders in particular, I think, are actually pretty poor at being able to articulate their reasoning for doing things. Good,
Yep.
good ones and bad ones. And
You
it's
and
not
me included.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I fortunately the going through the process of conducting designing and conducting the trainee program, you are forced to think much more about why do you do the things that you do and why don't you do the things that you don't. But generally speaking, traders aren't very good at doing that, and you don't have to be. It's actually got nothing to do with making money. As long as the process that you're doing is working, that you are following what is occurring to you as the best course of action at that time, and you follow it, and then that either makes money or it loses you less than what you were having the problem of being in a bad position, then that's all that it does matter. That's the main thing that matters, because that's probably a trait that you discover with being around trading as well. You don't necessarily have to know why something works. It definitely helps, particularly if the why is some of the context or the market conditions that support something working. It will help, but it doesn't actually the knowing why and the knowing how isn't the thing that actually banks cash. Isn't It's not what gets you paid.
I remember you once saying something along the lines of, I want to put words in your mouth, but it was something along the lines of, you don't value back testing or you don't believe in back testing. Do you remember?
Yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah.
you
No,
still?
the my my quote is back testing is useless. That's
Okay, there you go.
I'm on the record for going with back testing is useless. And so this is along the lines of a manual discretionary trader. When you are a manual discretionary trader, there is just no way that you can isolate all of the different variables that are going on at that moment and how your decision making is weighting them. There's just no way to go back through time and to be able to test what you would have done, compared to if you are actually running an automated strategy that has tight rules around it. You can actually go back and backtest something like that. But for manual discretionary trading, backtesting is useless. It's a case of coming up with theories and executing them with forward testing, putting real money on the line. You don't necessarily have to be betting big if it's something you're still trying to work out, but they need to be forward tested with real money, and that's really the only thing that is worthwhile. Back testing, yeah, you just cannot isolate the variables that were at play on that day. There's just no way of doing it.
What about if you're a new trader starting off trying to find your trade, or even an established trader who's looking for a new trade? What do you think about the idea of starting the strategy formulation with some back tests to establish like basic patterns and then moving forward from there? Do you think there's any validity in that, or do you think that's still a trap?
There can be some learning from that, but the you, there will be subtleties about each of those days that you completely miss. And for example, a lot of the way that we traded, spreading two products against each other means that you don't have a lot of movement in the spread. Like spreads, generally do this, and occasionally they will have a move, and that's obviously when you have problems as a trader, as a spread trader. The thing that causes the spread to break and you have directional move in the spread as opposed to just moving back and forward, that often isn't a result of something that happened today, or and it might not even be a result of something that happened yesterday. This can actually be something that's been building for half a week or more, and then there's just this final little extra catalyst that's the straw that breaks the camel's back, and then it snaps. And if you go back testing, you will think that the final little catalyst, the straw that broke the camel's back, that was the thing. When next time around, that thing probably won't cause any effect whatsoever. It was only the fact that the market got itself into this pressurized situation, and that was the final straw on that day. And so that's what I'm speaking about there. it's very difficult to trace the origins of why something ends up breaking, but you can identify when these pressure situations have got themselves there.
Hint: it's a bond syndication. It's a it's a 10-year government bond syndication is what's going
Yeah,
on.
that
That's
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
so I'm curious, like, just to step off the, like, being too trading specific and just go a bit more broadly, but like, how do you see like success in life, and how do you measure success, not just for people who are traders but anyone? Like, what's how should people go about having a successful life, people who maybe haven't thought about it too much, right, and just living their day-to-day life? How should they measure whether they're successful or not, or what can they do to have a feeling of success in life?
I was actually having this conversation very recently, and the direction that we ended up going with the conversation was because you want the measurable part to it. You want the feeling of success, but also some measurable, tangible parts of that as well. And where we ended up was along the lines of your physiology. You know, you will have
Interesting.
a certain physiology that is going on when you believe that you're kicking goals and living a life that is satisfactory for you. Now, that's going to change whatever phase of life you're in. What a satisfactory or a satisfying, what an enjoyable and fruitful life looks like for you can look very different. You know, if you're early 20s or your early 40s or your early 60s, those things can look really, really different. But if you have the baseline there of a physiology that is experiencing satisfaction and fulfillment at those times, I think you get the best of both worlds because you have the feeling that the way that you are doing things is giving you an enjoyable feeling that is energizing you, that is encouraging you to do more of what you're doing that is working. It's a positive feedback loop as far as how it feels. But then leaving behind how it feels and what's measurable, your physiology can be measurable, whether it's just your heart rate as an example, or whether you're going and actually getting medical blood tests and that kind of thing done to see where your levels are, because you can have your cortisol tested and that sort of thing. um, those are things that you can actually measure and track through time that will tell you if you were more stressed than last time that happened, or what is the trend of your heart rate or your heart rate variability. And to the extent that you are experiencing satisfaction, you're a lot more resilient in things as well. When you're not feeling as though life is going well, little frustrations or little annoyances are experienced as big problems. And the opposite goes the other way as well. When you're kicking goals, things are going well, you can actually have some pretty big speed bumps that come along, but you are able to navigate them and move through them a lot more smoothly, and you are a lot more resilient with it. And so physiology is how I think is a good way to measure it, because that reduces the impact of what phase of life are you in. Is that your physiology will still be in a similar way.
I've got to say, this is a fascinating answer that I did not expect. Um, I don't think I've heard anyone else use physiology as the benchmark for life success, like, other than maybe people who are very, very focused on like health and fitness and stuff. Um, but a few questions, like, what about what about um, having a healthy, like you might, part of your success might be having a healthy and successful family and stuff like that. So, like, do you measure their health and their physiology as part of your measure of success, or do you think your measure of success is how that impacts you as an individual? Because obviously, success might be at the individual level, but it also might be at the family or social level. There might be people who sacrifice their health in order to create great social change, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, we've definitely seen traders as well sacrifice health for months at a time. Poor sleeping habits, poor eating habits, poor exercise habits, but dialed in, focused, making cash. And if you look at the net effect of that, once the whole period is there, it was a pretty cheap expense that they took at the time by all of the sacrificing of health and things, because the amount of money they were, we're talking about guys that can make life-changing money in short spaces of time. And so overall, then they're probably much less stressed and much less under pressure down the track than what they were at the time. And the period of sacrificing health was very much a good trade. So there is definitely examples of that. With the example of having family and wanting them to be part of your success, or that you also want your family to be living a satisfying life, and that can mean then that you can live a satisfying life. That certainly is there, but it invites the trap of your feeling of well-being and accomplishment and life satisfaction is dependent upon something that is outside of your control. You know, where somebody in your family is, or where somebody is close to you, you have to be careful to the degree to which you will let their current state impact your experience of life. Doesn't mean that you can't go and help people, but it's really not a useful thing to have it set up that if and the best example of that's like happy wife, happy life. Like that is absolute rubbish. Like if you believe that you've got to do stuff every day to make a happy wife so then you can have a happy life, your life's done. That's just that it is not how the world works. And so
Or
doesn't
maybe
mean that
the
you.
other way of looking at that is that if you are physiologically in a good state, your wife will be happy, right? That's the other way you could interpret that one
Yeah, I
as a way
don't
of
necessarily.
validating it.
I Well, yes, but I also don't think that that's necessarily the case either. Just because you're in
No,
a good frame of mind doesn't mean that she's also
of
going to
course.
be in a good frame of mind as well.
Yeah.
But that's the trap of that you don't want to get into. You do, the people that are close to you and that you do care about, you do want to try to help them have a satisfying life also. But you can't. There's got to be a barrier there with something that you can't control. You need to be very selective about the degree to which you will let that in and really affect what's going on inside you.
So would you recommend that people get like I don't know, do health checks and stuff like that as a matter of like monitoring their success?
Recommend people get health checks.
Like in terms of you're saying
Yeah,
physiology,
yeah.
sorry, is the measure of your success, really, right? That's how you can measure it. So how do you like? Obviously, they can be how you feel, but I mean, is it just like? Does that mean if you're obese or you have diabetes that you're not successful? Obviously, you're not maybe not really successful in terms of your health in that case. But does that mean that you're not a successful person, or how? I'm just trying to like. It's such an unusual answer that I wasn't expecting. I'm now trying to
Yeah, yeah, okay.
reconcile it to my own idea of like success, and I'm thinking about these things like Stephen Hawking. I'm sure many people would argue was wildly successful. Um, sorry, yeah, would
All
many
good.
people would argue was wildly successful. I'm just going to get rid of that annoying noise. Yeah, let me start that again. So Stephen Hawking, I think many people would argue was wildly successful, right? He changed our understanding of physics, of nature, of everything, and yet he had like a crippling life of living in a wheelchair and horrible disease. So like in your mind, like at the height of his notoriety, let's say, when he is widely published and well known and recognized, and a lot of people get a lot of information and insight from him, but he's trapped in a wheelchair. Do you think he's successful or he's not successful?
So he will have a certain level of, you know, height of physiology that's going to be available to him in his current condition. And if you have something going on that means that you're you can't have your physiology achieve the heights of what other people can. It would only be a case of, as best you can, maxing out your own physiology, and that's going to give you that case. Because there will always be some outliers as well. There'll be people that are extremely unhealthy and yet very satisfied with their life, but it's not really the path, a reliable path for almost everybody. You don't want to, in that way, try to become an outlier. In that way, you want to try and be, in well within the bell curve. And so
Sure.
the physiology is a good measure, a good measurement for that. Because if we, and so along the lines of, should you be getting health tested and things like that, generally, if you're doing the right things, if you're taking actions that mean that after the action you feel better, like, exercising, eating good food, after you do the things you feel better, as opposed to, you know poor exercise habits, poor nutritional habits, you don't feel better after you do them. If you're going to the effort to do those things, you generally probably don't need to get health tested all that much, other than it is the measurable component. If you go and do have a blood test done and you check where is your cortisol, where is your testosterone, you can compare that through time and correlate that with results that you're getting. If it's less than what it was before, be it the cortisol or the testosterone, the establishing a baseline can be a good idea to do as well. And so, in the Stephen Hawking example, he would have baselines that he can see, are things deteriorating through time or are things getting better. And I was in a conversation about a month ago with a guy that was beginning on antidepressants, and he was a bit reluctant to do it. But as a result of quite a bit of time considering it, it was seeming like more and more of a good idea to him. And so I'm certainly not qualified to comment on whether or not he should be having them or not. But what I did say to him was, go and get your blood tests done. And I gave him the ones that I thought that he should go and get done for a baseline before you start having these things that you're going to be on for a while. Go and get this baseline so if what has affected, what's dropped. Are you more or less, is there more or less cortisol in you now than what there was before? Is your testosterone higher or lower than what there was before? Just go and get a baseline. For to go, like, you probably need to spend the money to do that yourself. That's not covered by healthcare and things like that. But that is not the time to be saving a couple of $100. Go and get these things done so you got the baseline, and then you can refer to it again in the future. And you want that to be part of the assessment of what's going on as a result of taking the antidepressants. That was, yeah, quite
Yeah.
important, what I said to him.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Actually, it's probably something that a lot of people don't think about at those kind of moments in life, I guess. Um, so it's about your relative health in a way. So it like maybe comparing more to yourself than necessarily to other people because you've got your own unique situation going on. This raises kind of two questions for me. So one is, I would assume that things become normalized, right? Like over time, like if you get to the point where you're um, very successful and making millions of dollars, then just being the same level of success and making millions of dollars becomes just your normal state, and that's going to be reflected in just an average kind of physiology. So then, in order to move up to a higher point, you need to be achieving even bigger things if there is like a feedback to your physiology. And in order to drop to a lower state, then you probably need to be uh, achieving less millions of dollars, but maybe still millions of dollars. So maybe you can feel kind of crappy while still making lots of money because you only made $8 million this month, but you made $30 million last month or something like that. Like, is that fair to say? Do you think people, like, for me, I think things become normalized, right? So my state becomes normalized. The fact that I have a family or I have a home or I have a job all becomes normalized. If you don't have a job and then suddenly you get a job, you feel elated. But if you're in the same crappy job that you've been in for the last 2 years, you're not every day waking up and like giving thanks for the fact that you got a job because you know is nothing new.
You do certainly become acclimatized to things. I think there's two ways of looking at that. One is a lot if you are, because you can enjoy your job and then after a bit of time you no longer enjoy it. That's definitely something that can happen. So something that was giving you a positive lift can become the thing that is pulling you down. That's definitely possible. The other part to that as well is the you detaching the $30 million that you made one month, 8 million the next month, and then say you're a little bit disappointed that you didn't do as well as the previous month. That doesn't necessarily have to be a reduction in what would end up being the physiological responses. That you don't necessarily, like, you still can believe yourself to be successful and doing well, and the month to month fluctuations are just part of a normal course of distribution of making profits. And so you can experience all of that. You can actually be identifying parts of that previous month where you did drop the ball, where you could have done better. And all of that can occur in amongst an environment where you're not actually dragging yourself down in the way that turning up to a job you hate every day drags you down. Because overall, what you're doing there is you're participating in life in a way that does excite you and that you do enjoy. And if something really is doing that for you, there is no way that life is going to be without challenge. And so, you can still be annoyed and frustrated when challenges come up and things get in the way and stop you doing the things that you want. You'll still experience frustration, but frustration more in the sense of how a tiger would feel frustration when they didn't catch the thing that they wanted. The tiger doesn't, go sulking in the cave that afternoon. It doesn't spill over into that for the tiger. It's a frustration of, they're going to be even more hungry the next time. And so you're going to have the physiological response from that. The other question in there as well is, if you set some goals and you achieve them, and then that becomes a new baseline, and then you repeat this process. When you look at the physiology isn't something that will just keep going up and up. Like you can, high testosterone levels are going to correlate with people that are competitive and are being successful and are getting things done, men obviously. But it's not like your testosterone levels can just keep going up and up if you
Mm.
get to a new baseline, and then that just doesn't happen. And in fact, I have examples of guys that have basically thought, all right, the thing to do is just to turn myself into a masculine tyrannosaurus and get my testosterone levels as high as I can. And you get results from doing that, but it's also a double-edged sword. Like you can also you cause yourself problems that you didn't necessarily know were going to be there, especially if you turn yourself into a masculine tyrannosaurus and there's still that little boy part of you that wants to be accepted by women, or has something little like that going on. You end up being so incongruent because part of you is the masculine tyrannosaurus, but then there's the little boy part that still wants to be looked favorably upon by the women in his life or something like that. And so it's
Mm.
it's not necessarily, and the same with cortisol as well. You don't want no cortisol, you'll get nothing done. Like, you actually need some cortisol to be able to function properly and to have the fluctuations throughout a 24-hour period. And so those it's not like those things just extend forever and keep getting better and better. There's sweet spots that need to be attained.
Yeah, and you need to be authentic, right? Like, there's only so long you can exist in a non-authentic state of being. So, like, if you're like, this is something that I've kind of reflected on too when I was talking about values and stuff like that. Part of my journey through trading was to actually remove some values that I had that I thought were not conducive to making money, and put in place other values. So I went through a bit of a process with that of trying to identify my values and trying to consciously change them, which I think I did successfully, at least to some extent, make those changes. But if you just try to cover it up instead of doing the deep work, like if you just go, I'm just going to become a masculine Tyrannosaurus Rex without doing the core work that requires you to authentically become a masculine Tyrannosaurus Rex, which I guess some people want to be that. But then all it's going to happen is at some point you're going to collapse, right? Like, because you're having to pump energy into this thing to like overcome your actual natural state. Would you agree with that?
The authenticity discussion is very interesting, and it's the degree to which incongruencies, whatever that word is, are exposed is part of that, because you can definitely get your testosterone levels very high and not have problems, but that is, yeah, as you said, if you've done work to make sure that if there are any unresourceful parts of you that are going to be exposed in that process, you need to be working with them to expose it. And when you start talking about authenticity, you know, to what degree are you being inauthentic if you try to do something or express a side of your personality that you haven't done before, but that's a necessary part of your personality in order to get some results? If somebody was to step into a sales role for the first time and they've never done sales and they feel bad about doing sales, and then but they have a product that they want to sell to the world that they believe can be extremely beneficial to the world, they're not being their authentic self trying to be a salesperson the first few times. It's going to take time before that actually is an authentic expression of themselves. And so, you know, it gets spoken about quite often that you should be authentic. But if the authentic version of you is incompetent or unable to get results that you actually do want, you actually have to be an inauthentic version of yourself for a while until that becomes the authentic version of yourself. Like, if your authentic self is not capable, why would you continue to be your incapable self on under the guise of I'm being authentic?
Yeah, that makes sense. For me, I don't think about. I think there's a little bit of just difference in word meaning here, because I don't think of like if you're stepping into an area where you don't have the skills and you need to learn the skills. I don't see that as being inauthentic. I see it's more for me when I. It's more the thing of taking on a persona that isn't me, because I think you can still be very authentic, putting yourself out of your comfort zone, absolutely, and learning new skills and stuff. But if you try to pretend that you're a person that you're not, more in terms of your personality, I think that takes a lot of energy. Like, I think we all have like a natural state that, and we can move out of that state to some extent, but there's, it probably comes back to those core beliefs and stuff. I think, like, if you have core beliefs that you're working against, like those beliefs that are like embedded deep down in within us, like from childhood, if we're actively working against them, there's always this kind of conflict there that creates a massive energy burn. And I think if you're doing that, you burn yourself out if you're
Yeah,
just constantly
yeah.
operating in that way.
Acting incongruently with who you naturally are is exhausting and frustrating, and it's unsustainable. However, you can't disregard the flip side to that as well, as continuing to act in the way that you're currently acting. If it's not, if it is generally a slow drain on your energy and a slow drain on your ambition, and your life isn't getting better as the result of your day to dayness, you're going to cause yourself the same problem, but it's just going to take a lot longer to play out. And so, by acting in congruence with who you naturally are, that individual day isn't as exhausting, but you will end up in the same spot. Just it'll take you longer to get there. And so, to some degree, you need to be pushing those unresourceful parts of yourself in a sustainable way, so that months and years down the track, you are in a better position than where you previously were.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's a very good point as well. Obviously, there's a lot of people who are in a stage of life or in a situation of life that they're unhappy with, and that also can be a massive energy drain. So yeah, that's a really
Mm.
really good point. One of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking earlier about physiology was that you might have a value on longevity, on living a long time, and having a healthy life. So I wanted to put that to you because we were talking about values and stuff before. Like, is that for you like one of the ultimate measures of success, or maybe the ultimate measure of success, like how long you live and how like your quality of life as you're older?
Yeah, if you were going to go down the path and having, like a long life as the barometer, you also want the quality of life part to that as well. Um, that would be important too. Not necessarily like I would be of the opinion that I think I will live quite a long time, but I don't necessarily think about that in terms of that's going to mean that I have been successful. It's more I'm more curious to live for a long time to see what happens.
Yeah.
Like I think where we currently are, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of some angst that is around. However, like what a time to be alive, where all of the current possibilities are here and the possibilities that are right in front of us now. Like what a time to be alive, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's more like, yeah, I don't want to drop off before the end of the movie to see where this thing's going. Would be more of the motivation for it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It is quite fascinating, isn't it? And we've had like we're in a really we grew up in a really interesting time where we went from, when we were at school, there were no mobile phones. And then at the
Mm.
end of school, they were starting to come in. And now, people are going to have computers in their brains and stuff like, who knows
Yeah,
where this is
exactly. Yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah.
But it's not slowing down, that's for sure. So it is quite fascinating. Um, it does, like, it brings up a lot of questions for me about, like, do our political structures and stuff like that need to change? And that's something that I'm kind of curious. Maybe we can have another chat on that another day. But like, just the ideas of capitalism and whether there's going to be enough jobs, or how our jobs will look anyway. Not necessarily whether there's going to be enough, because like now an influencer is a apparently like an acceptable job title to be an influencer. I was having a chat to a mate the other day who is in the trading sphere, and we were having a conversation about some of his ideas and stuff like that. And he was saying that so he wants to do some more stuff in the trading realm, and he was saying that his perspective is that trading will, like, it's only going to become more and more popular, because people want, they want to make money, and like just a normal job isn't giving them that escape from money and from the day-to-day job kind of idea. And I made a comment to him as a bit of a joke, but also kind of a little bit seriously, which was that trading is like OnlyFans for men. We can't like, no one's going to pay us to go and take our shirts off. I don't know, maybe some people will, but there's also some kind of like, I think for a lot of guys, and probably you and me included, we're not really that keen on stripping for money. But trading is something that a lot of men probably, uh, it appeals to them as a way of making money, maybe less so to women. So OnlyFans for men. That's
I,
that's
I, I
trading.
think we can all like I think you and I can both remember one trader in particular that was actually very good at also stripping for money.
Yes,
And
yes,
he
we
and he
do.
absolutely
Yes,
had the body to back it up. He was a
he
very
sure
strong man.
did. He's
Yeah,
a beautiful man, that's for sure.
he is.
Yeah. So just on like another random tangent, but we talked earlier about compromise, and a lot of your stuff that you do on only trade offs is also like about relationships and stuff like that. And you've got some really interesting stuff on there that really is quite thought provoking. But we've talked about compromise in the context of like success and trading and stuff like that. So how do you see compromise when it comes to relationships? Because for me, for myself with relationships, I feel like you're going to tell me I'm doing it wrong. But what my approach to some extent has been with my partner, like, we're always going to be some degree of not like agreeing on what's the best way forward with any given thing. And so my approach is basically like, well, whoever that issue causes the least amount of pain doesn't get their way, essentially. So like if it's a really important deal to me that this has to be done this way, and my partner doesn't really care, well, then we're going to do it my way. And if there's something that my partner's like, no, no, this should be this way, and I'm like, oh, well, I don't really care, then we'll do it her way. But like, very occasionally, obviously, you're going to have things where it's really important to both people, and then maybe I don't have the right skills to navigate that, right, in a relationship. But also, am I just taking the wrong approach here in thinking, well, if it's really not important to me, like if I give a 20% care about this thing and how it goes, and I think we can do it my partner's way, am I taking the wrong approach and just saying, okay, we'll do it your way then, or is there a better way to do it?
So the beginning of what you're speaking about there is a compatibility thing. And so compatibility in relationships, it can look along the lines of, you are compatible, that you both like the same things. But often a far more useful compatibility in relationships is what will create what you're talking about there. One personality feels strongly about a thing, but the other person, having the inverse of that, doesn't mind missing out on that thing in that way. Like, so you've got inverse compatibilities. I think that when you are, and like, if you're already in a relationship, there's not necessarily much you can do about that. But if you're seeking a relationship, that's something that you can do to
There's one
try
thing
and
you can
find.
do.
Well, of course, yes. But there is, you're able to not just seek what are you compatible with, but where are those inverse compatibilities. I think that can be a big part to it. Um, as far as what do you do when you are at a point where you can't reach a compromise? And I do think you have to be very careful with compromises. A lot of the times, a compromise is at best a temporary solution, because it really is, to some degree, everyone's not getting what they want. And that, if you're not careful, can very quickly turn into resentment and sort of a scorekeeping kind of system, which is obviously just horrible for everyone. And so if any compromises have been made, you kind of have to view them as, this is a temporary solution, and you might need ongoing temporary solutions if it is a particular issue that is big enough in your relationship and in your lives. um, but the worst thing that can happen is if you are arranging, or it's essentially like a discussion, a negotiation, is you can't, neither party can let the tension drop from that. It's actually the tension that will end up getting the best results, because quite often, what does happen is one party will essentially just roll over and submit to the other one. And that can be particularly problematic if it is the man that's, all right, let's just do it your way. Happy wife, try and keep this thing all, the it be it, and it becomes a bigger problem for the man that she's just onto him about it all the time. And so he gets to essentially remove two problems. He gets to remove the incompatible problem and remove the problem of she's just at him all day. And it seems like a better and better trade for him to make, but it's definitely the short term upside for a long term downside. And so one of the things that comes up quite frequently in terms of how do I manage how the rest of my life interacts with my trading with the experienced traders, is stuff like this. Like, you have to think about what is the flow on effect of decisions that you make. And almost one of the worst investments that you can do on a medium to long term perspective is to have some kind of impression about your relationship that it needs to be free of tension. Now, as men, most of the time, we would much prefer to not have a lot of drama and tension in our relationships, but it's actually tension that can get the best result out for everybody. You just have to have tension. It doesn't have to be drama, but tension needs to be there, and it's that friction that will actually find what is the best middle ground. Now, there is an amount of tension that just would be too much, and the whole thing will shake itself apart. But if there's no tension, then you're going to have all these little resentments and things building in the back end. And even if you have got yourself currently in life, there's very little tension and a lot of compatibility. That's not going to sit there very long. Like, phases of life move very quickly, and what creates that balance in one phase will very quickly change in a new phase. And so I would say that, like, don't expect there to be no tension. Tension needs to be there. Tension gets results in a way that passivity just can't.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is I need to smash this down and start again. So that's good.
No, no, not necessarily. No, I think no,
No,
that's a
I'm kidding.
reasonable approach. And the weighting of how important is this to me versus what it costs me, and how important, like, all of those discussions. It's very much how men think about the world. It's a logical, linear, um, like way of thinking, which is obviously very useful for getting things done in the world. It's generally, most of the time, you can't. It doesn't work to have those logical, linear discussions in your relationships, just because women will think so differently. And so it's got to be navigated in a way that you can't navigate something like that with another man of, let's sit down and make a plan here and then execute on this plan. And any plan is going to have inconvenient times for either of us at some point in the future. Like, doing all of that is something that two men can really do, but a man and a woman, it doesn't really work that way. And it's not supposed to, I don't think.
So I'll go with men for the second half of my life as maybe the solution. But no, I think for me
That's a trade off, right?
that is a trade off. I think for me, like I do have that sense of tension. I wouldn't say outright conflict, but I would say yeah, there's definitely a tension. I think a healthy tension in my relationship when it comes to decision making, um, and I think yeah, to a large extent, like the stuff that does. I guess my core question is really like, should I be worried about just giving up the stuff that I really don't think matters to me that much? Like, are we going to have like blue or purple curtains? And it's like, oh, okay, I vote blue, and she says, I really, really, really want purple. Okay, I don't care. you know, let's get purple curtains, whatever. Like obviously that's a very simplistic example, but it's just kind of a decision I made at some point was like, don't argue about small stuff. Like, just let that go. And I don't feel like I have any resentment towards any of the small stuff I let go. And I feel that I also get a, that gets reciprocated as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that my partner, you kind of learn each other over time. My partner probably now knows that if I'm making a big deal about something, that I probably feel strongly about it. It's not just whether the curtains are blue or purple, but it's something that I deeply care about. So
Yeah.
I guess that was the
No,
kind of cause of the question.
I think it does sound like you're doing that pretty well. I guess each individual incident doesn't exist in a vacuum, and you just
Yeah.
have to be careful that you don't get in the habit of conceding because there's been three things in a row you didn't care about, but then you're kind of in that habit, and then a thing comes along that you slightly do care about, but not really, and you treat that the same. And because, like, very quickly you can be just in the habit of doing things that way, and going against the grain can feel like a disruptive thing to do, and that's not necessarily easy to navigate as well. Like, things can legitimately change, and that means you need to conduct yourself in a different way. And being the man in the relationship, it can often be a much bigger deal when a man wants to change something that he said he would do, or do something in a different way when he already committed to doing it in a particular way. And now you can have very good reasons for doing that, but as a man, you don't have the leeway to change your mind and have that be a disruption for others. Like, you're going to have to navigate that situation and explain, like, not necessarily explain yourself, but there's going to be dealing with that situation if you're the man, compared to women get far more slack in that way. Like, she can say she'll do something and then not do it, and then, oh, but here's my reason, and then it's just
I
one of
didn't
the
feel like it.
differences. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just is one of the differences that is there, and so
Yep.
you just have to be careful that you're not getting worn down in that way.
Yeah, I definitely don't feel like that for me. I mean, it was just I guess, a thought that came into my head that I wanted to quiz you about. Um, the other thing that's kind of on my mind as well, like I've had relationships in the past, particularly when I was trading, where my partner wanted me to like compromise on success, and so there would just be this kind of like that nagging thing you're talking about. I have experience in the past where I'll have like because we used to trade nights, right? We used to trade overnight. So I'd have a partner that would always be like, I want you to go to bed at the same time as me. And, I'm trying to have a conversation with her about, but that's when I literally am starting work. Like, yeah, that's great. I would love
Yeah.
to do that as well. Unfortunately, I basically, work nights. I don't know how many times we have to have this conversation, but I start work at 4 p.m. and in her and her thing will be like, well, you've already worked today. Like, why do you need to work tonight? It's like, no, but I didn't start work at 8 or 9 a.m. I started work at 4 p.m. and I work overnight. And there is like I feel like there is some kind of biological or like there's some kind of thing of like she's trying to see. I don't know if this is a female thing or not to say female, feminine thing, or whether both sexes do this to the same degree or not. But there's some kind of like, can I get him to compromise for me? Can I get him to compromise success? And it feels like a giant trap because I also feel that if I were to compromise, then at some point she's going to lose interest because I'm not successful, or she's going to lose interest because I'm, um, giving in too easily, or something like that. But it's something that I've reflected on at different times in life because I feel like I've had multiple partners who have had that kind of strategy of like trying to get me to compromise on something that's going to make me successful. And I've never really come down to the like what is that that's actually going on, like what is driving that behavior from them. Like surely if your partner was doing something that was going to make them successful, it's going to make your family successful and you'd want to be supportive of that, why would you be undermining that like constantly, consistently? Have you got any insights into that, because I'm really curious to know what you think about that.
The core part of that about the distracting you from being successful, I think, is a bit of a red herring. Not completely, but I think if we start before that, then like women are generally wanting to see to what degree can they influence the men that are around them, and this happens very young. Like I have a daughter, and she does it. To what degree can I get dad to do stuff for me? And that is really a core program that is there running with women. And to the degree to which they can influence you, it's obviously useful for them. But you're right; it comes at the trade-off of losing attraction, particularly on certain things. With the idea of success, the thing that's built into that is the delayed gratification. Like when you're going to work and like trading during the nights, it's with a much longer term vision and a very long term vision that is part of that. Like you're wanting to be successful, years and decades into the future as a result of the actions that you're taking now, and you are happy to sacrifice the current moment to that cause. And that's something that generally men are very good at, and I think women are much less likely to be fond of. And in particular, if you are in a relationship with her, the degree to which your current actions aren't showing a fairly immediate benefit to her is the degree to which she will be less supportive of them, even if it's success that you're pursuing, that it's going to lead to a better life into the future. If that's not very tangible, as in like by breakfast time tomorrow, she will drop off pretty quickly in her what's this got to do with me type thing, and be less supportive of it. But it's those two things that are tying together. It's I can't really see an immediate benefit in this for me, and and it's the constant push. What can I get him to change about the way he's to what degree can I get him to change the way he's currently doing things by what I do and what I say and how I interact with him, just as a gauge, a constant gauge on how much influence that she has over you. And you're right, that needs to be kept in the appropriate balance. If she can't influence you at all, then that's obviously no good. She'll leave. But if she can influence you too much, then that's also terrible, and she'll leave. Both for obviously for opposite reasons. But that's just you're not. You, that's where the saying, and they have the equivalent saying here in Germany as well. And I was actually speaking with one of my German friends last weekend. The saying that you women, that you can't live with them and you can't live without them. It's kind of that's in the middle of it, and the can't live with them part is you can never just get something set up and then it's done. It's this constant needing to navigate that. To what degree can I influence his actions, and is it too much or not enough?
So would you
It's
say that like a core part of it is really comes down to time horizons then? Like obviously the thing of influencing your partner and seeing if you can influence them probably shows like some level of commitment or something. Maybe that's what that is. Is this guy committed to me? Will he do things when I ask him to? Will he change things that are important to him when I ask him to? But is the other one just that? Is it time horizon? Like, do you think women think in a shorter time horizon than men?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like women can't plan for the future and execute on those plans, but generally speaking, men are pretty good at going through the pain associated with delayed gratification when you feel like you're working towards something. And men are also very good at doing a calculation of how much input is required to get a certain output, and we will discount good feelings on the back of that. If I'm going to have to put in a whole bunch of effort to make a really nice breakfast, and then I'll get to eat the really nice breakfast, and that's going to feel great. But then there's going to be the washing up, and like a man can really do an efficiency calculation of all of that, and generally trade off the great feelings of enjoying the nice breakfast because it'll save a few hours of time and not having to clean it all up afterwards. Whereas women typically won't see the effort associated. They will anticipate the good feelings and the enjoyment of the breakfast. And so yeah, those are the two different things. And the degree to which she is going to get something that she can enjoy in the very immediate future will be the degree to which she won't try to influence what you're doing. There was a good example with one of the trainees that comes to mind as well, and this was the like trainees when they were trading crypto. And crypto around the time when the CME Bitcoin contract had come in, and that really started to have an effect on what Bitcoin did, because Bitcoin trades 24/7, whereas the traditional markets all in Sydney time close on Saturday morning, and then they're closed again until Monday morning. And there was a time when Bitcoin became a lot more accountable to the rest of the financial ecosystem when that CME Bitcoin contract came in place. And that meant that it just wasn't as free to move as what it what previously was, and also the other coins as well. But that meant on Saturday morning, when CME closed for the week and there was that accountability was gone, and crypto could again trade around without the influence of the financial markets going on. For a while there was really good trading opportunities at that time. But we're talking, depending on the time of year, 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock Sydney time, AM on Saturday morning. And one guy's girlfriend just really didn't like that. But it's Saturday morning, we go for a walk, we get our coffee, and she just made such a big deal of it that it was too painful for him, and he stopped doing it. And meanwhile, a lot of other people are making really good money just until lunchtime on Saturday mornings, and it really does, give an example that like he was potentially setting something up for the future that would have been to her benefit as well, but she just wasn't able to let go of the thing that was a nice thing to do on the Saturday morning. um, it's men and women are wired differently, and you need both. You need someone with a long vision, building the empire, but you also need somebody taking care of the important things that are going on now, and that's that tension. You don't want to
So it's like,
remove the tension.
hey, Mr. Empire, the children are on fire. Like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
maybe we should deal
yeah,
with that first.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. Oh, that's really cool. I think this is so we've gone for like an hour and a half, so it's been a pretty good conversation, and there's a lot I'd really like to talk to you about still, but maybe we can do that for another time.
Yep.
But is there anything that you wanted to add, or is there anywhere that people should um, check out something that you think is interesting or some of your work?
So I'd probably point towards the YouTube channel. So Only Trade Offs is the name of the YouTube channel, and it's still very much a work in progress that is going on there. But what I'm in the process of doing is compiling a lot of these thoughts, and it's a lot of the conversations that I'm really having on a daily basis, as far as with the trainees or with the experienced traders that I do manage, or the other performance consulting and stuff that I do, which is along the lines of helping people manage how the rest of their life is interacting with their main goals, with their performance. And it does bring about a lot of interesting conversations. And, because trade offs are at the heart of a lot of that. And the idea that you might find a solution or a trade off or a combination of trade offs that currently works. And there is a context that facilitates that. And, that's going to shift as you move forward through life and want different things. And so, quite a lot of them are very interesting conversations. And the YouTube channel at the moment is aimed at putting some of these packaged in a way for YouTube that can be presented as sort of concise and useful pieces of information. The presenting and packaging of this for YouTube is still something that I'm very much working on, because when somebody comes to me as they who already knows me and I'm helping them with these issues, you they already believe I can help them, and then they give you time to be able to help them. Whereas when somebody clicks on a YouTube video, they don't know me at all, and so you need to package and present things in such a way to be able to earn that trust quickly. And so that's part of the learning that I'm doing with that at the moment. But the core philosophies and the interesting conversations are on there.
Yeah, I can definitely agree to that. I think you've done a really good job of creating some very interesting content there on YouTube that's very thought provoking and will get people thinking about things. And yeah, I guess the way you package it, I know what you mean. Like you've managed to get it very information dense. Like you've got short clips that have some really interesting stuff in there that I think people will find quite useful, and yeah, in little bite-sized chunks. So it's quite useful.
Hmm.
Okay, well, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, Isaac. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.